Muchísimas gracias por sintonizar a Talking Rock en Español. Estamos transmitiendo desde la ciudad más feliz del mundo, Anaheim, California. Yo soy su servidor, Héctor Robles, y a mi lado está
Cristian Mejía.
Y vamos a hablar rock en español.
Hey, good afternoon. Hello, everyone. Thanks again for tuning in to Talking Rock en Español. Aquí estoy con Héctor.
¿Qué onda? Hello to everyone in cyberspace today.
Muchísimas gracias a todas las personas que están haciendo download. Les agradecemos demasiado.
Díganle a sus amigos, a sus abuelitas, para que todos escuchen.
Pronto vamos a poner un número de teléfono o como pueden hacer un comentario.
Para que dejen mensajes y nos digan si les gusta, no les gusta. Okay, and we're going to go ahead and read off the news, o no las noticias, pero las noticias de las tocadas que van a estar pasando aquí localmente. Entonces, dale, Cristian.
For Thursday, September 20th, at the Antigua Bar and Grill, Vin Fuhrer, Fe Red, and Leo Machado performing. Address to the location is 116 East Beverly Boulevard in Montebello, California, and that's the Antigua Bar and Grill. For September 21st, we have Neblina celebrating their 10th year anniversary over at Mal's Bar. Location to that is 2331 South Hill Street in Los Angeles. We also have my co-host here, Experimento 56, Hector's band.
Picking it up, dude. We've been playing a lot of shows recently.
Good, man. Good for you guys. They're going to be performing over at the Airliner with Raza Cósmica, Alianza Rebelde, and Canvas. So you guys might want to go ahead and check that out and, you know, give them a kiss when you see them over there.
Yo voy a ser el chango que está allí. Si miran un changuito, ese soy yo.
All right. Then for the international ones is basically we have Jarabe de Palo performing at the Troubadour, and that is produced by Galería Alternativa. They're going to be performing with Bang Data and also Son Soles, which we had here on podcast number
Last
10.
Week.
Yeah. We're going to go ahead and post up a link on our page so you guys can purchase your tickets for this show for Jarabe de Palo over at the Troubadour. And that's in West Hollywood, 9681 Santa Monica Boulevard. We also just received news that the Triton Festival is going to...
Hold on. Beep, 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 beep. Now in the news.
We also received some news that the Triton Festival is going to be... It's going on in really good news, you know. It's going to be Sunday, October 21st. El Tri, Inspector, Oso Matli, Poncho Sánchez, Conjunto Nueva Ola, Profecía, Víspera, and Neblina performing. And tickets are on sale for $25 at tritonfestival.com.
That is awesome, actually. Pretty cool lineup, and price isn't going to gouge me out, dude.
Yeah,
That's cool.
So, you know, we highly recommend that you guys go ahead and go check out these shows, support the local bands, and support your rock en español. And now we have a very special guest here today.
Oh, yeah. Actually, this is going to be a good podcast, my friend, just because this is more of, I guess, the industry, right? This guy's really in the industry. He does the Scarga over at the Universal City Walk. I mean, talking big time, bro.
Yes, we basically have Jorge Nicolas, and he is one of the pioneers, one of the early promoter, I would say, from the late 90s, early 2000s. And he has also written a book, which we're going to talk about a little bit.
Dude, I saw that book, bro. I didn't think that stuff existed, man. That's pretty cool stuff. You got to check out that book.
You have to check this book out. Very cool, very good. We're going to go ahead and put a link also on our page so you guys can go ahead and click on it and buy it from us. And also on the news, you know, we basically want to thank our first sponsor, you know.
What?
Yeah, our first sponsor, which is Amazon. So any of the artists that you hear, listen to, writers, anybody that interests you, you know, just come down to our page and, you know, click on the link. It's going to
purchase whatever you're going to purchase anyways.
Purchase whatever you're going to purchase from, you know.
Click on the links that we have there on our website. Support the scene, and thanks again to Amazon.
Today we are actually with Jorge, you know, Leal, right?
Yes.
Jorge Nicolas Leal from, he's one of the, I want to say you're kind of like, you came in the 2000s, right? Or late 90s that you started promoting, promoting shows?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that? How was it that how did you get into booking shows or producing shows and
what have you done, actually?
What have you done? Can you, because I know I've seen you and you're like, at least to me, you're like a very knowledgeable cat that has a lot of history in the whole LA rock and Español scene.
Well, first of all, thank you. How's everybody? How are you guys? Thank you, Christian and Hector, for having me, and whoever's listening to us.
A lot of people. So it's a good thing, man. It's a really good thing.
As a matter of fact, we were checking out our stats, and we have people in Africa listening now.
That's pretty cool.
No, I'm just fucking with you guys.
My cousins, they're over there. That's why
they're from South Africa.
They're working down there. So, anyways, no. Well, I guess there's an English football term which is the utility man. I'm sure there, like in other sports they have that, but I guess I could call myself that. So a little bit of what I have done or do. I mean, like, I actually got started, booking bands and putting on my own shows because I like the music. I at the time, which was late '99, I didn't see that those shows was happening. So it was one of those things where, you can bitch and moan all the time with your friends, like, oh, the shows are not as fun as before, or actually try to do that. And I was lucky, like, I'm not gonna say that, like, oh, just I started doing shows and everything happened. Like, I was lucky there was a scene that was more robust at the time, and I was able also to not only tap on the local bands, but also tap on the border bands, on the Tijuana, Mexicali, Ensenada, Tecate bands, and also bands from up north. And so we developed this kind of wider transnational, trans-state, Northern California network.
So then you started doing shows away from Southern California, like San Francisco?
San Jose, Fresno, Sacramento. Yes.
Oh, man. And how did that turn out? I mean, what was the turnaround as far as...
And what were the years that this was happening?
Yeah, so basically, so I started in 99 proper, but, like I had been in the scene since, like 92, 93 as a fan, as, somebody that really liked this. And then I interned for a show, a rock and Español show on KPFK called Caracol Puccini, which was the precursor of Travel Tips. So, Travel Tips wasn't even around, and I was like 16, And then my profession is journalist. So I was a journalist for a number of years as well. And also I did TV writing, and now I'm doing a doctorate in history at UC San Diego. So that's kind of like all the stuff that I have done in the middle, And in going back to the question, well, at the time, as I said, like there were scenes happening in San Francisco, in Fresno, in Sacramento, not that big, okay? So, but it was interesting to go over there, and sometimes you would have 50, 100 people in shows, but then you would meet those bands, and those bands would invite you again, and then you would have a bigger crowd, Like also we did a lot of the college. So as a booker, I used to manage bands or like book them shows. We would go to like the UCs, the Cal State. So we had also that network, and then we went into the Midwest as well. Well, we kind of stepping back, we have to remember the '90s and what the '90s. I mean, like this is really like the music is related to the social and political. In the '90s, like we had this big backlash, against Latinos because of Proposition 187 in California, then 209, and then 227, which like one was affirmative action, and then one was the elimination of bilingual education, and on all that, like came to galvanize the college kids, so what they wanted to hear wasn't their parents' music, or they just necessarily didn't want to hear just party music. They wanted to hear conscious type of music, and that's how these relationships were built. We would go into into the Cal States or the UCs, and that would be through the invitation of organizations like the Mechas, the Latino Business Associations, like all those different organizations. So it was a really organic type of, like a lot of these kids that were, like in San Francisco or in Sonoma or in Santa Barbara, for example, they were actually from LA. So they wanted to hear those bands that they grew, like they went to high school with. So
there was a connection.
There was that connection, right?
Plus, not to mention that they also have like terrestrial radio.
Yes.
Where they can support the shows and support the bands by playing their music, right?
Exactly. And then more to the point of that was the audience that you wanted to tap into, and they were responding not only to the music, to the message. You would also, like the shows that I got to work on book, they were also around, important dates, like Cinco de Mayos or marches or rallies. So that helped, not being a one-off thing.
I know this is kind of a little bit off topic because you're still going with the stuff that you've been doing, but how do you see the scene from then compared to now? Like, what's your kind of your opinion on that situation?
Yeah, that's a question that I do get asked a lot, So I was thinking about that, coming here, like that's kind of like a question that,
That is gonna
it's gonna come up, right? And I wish I could give you, I could give you an answer of, like, what do I see? I think that, one, we have different realities in terms of, like, obviously, how we live, and also, but, in terms of, believe it or not, I think Latinos are making inroads in a lot of ways. So that's why the music has, like, gotten a little more diffuse.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just because, like, before we didn't really have anything, so we all had to stick together, right, and create this scene, and that was great. And
So you build a community back then.
it was more of a community.
I did see that when I first heard of it. I think many people have actually listened to that. One of the first bands I ever heard was, Maria Fatal.
Mm-hmm.
And when I did see that, and then like the publications that were around, like La Banda Elástica, it seemed like there was some sort of a community.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, I was not doing anything related with rock and español. I was, basically playing blues, and I was playing with a whole bunch of Anglo kids and stuff. But nothing with that. But then I noticed that there was this little movement.
Mm-hmm.
There was like some sort of a unity. And I honestly don't really see that happening nowadays.
No, you're right, and I think it's a kind of a shame. I mean, going back to the question, I mean, there was a community, and I think that was what set apart. If nothing else, because we all, squabble as well, and then, echábamos chisme y de que hoy mira esa banda. I mean, like, let's just be clear that, that always happens. It's human nature. I mean, taxistas are also, not all gonna get along. But at the end of the day, we did feel like it was a community. So, which is different, because I also got to work at the Roxy and also other venues, and you would see bands, like, kind of like what you were describing of, like, you play, right? And you have your band, and then you go, you play, and you support your band, and that's it. You have no community. Like, and I would see that, like, in kind of like in the mainstream / Anglo scene, like, there would be like 4 or 5 bands in every night, right? Their fans of a particular band, they would just go and listen to that band, right? And then they would leave. That wouldn't happen with us. Like, it was, if Maria Patal would play with Chencha or with Ruido de Fondo or whoever, right? People would stick around, Yeah, we would be like, we would be saying, like, that's not what I like or whatever, but you would stick around. It was like a whole show, not as now that I think what happened, just kind of like finishing up this question, is that I think that happened is like, the genres got more defined. And I think that that's kind of like the thing, like everybody became their own tribe. So like the indie kids, they're going to stick with their indie, and, the ska kids are going to, stick around with their ska. And like the old timers, we kind of be like, nothing kind of compares to, what we had, which was great, And maybe it wasn't, but that's how we're,
Do you feel that the quality of music maybe is, because I mean, as a consumer, I listened to a lot of the stuff in the 90s. Even in the Anglo community, it was very breakthrough. Like it was fresh, And I find that a lot of bands, there's nothing fresh about them. Mm-hmm. It's just like, okay, that guy's trying to be like AC/DC. That guy's trying to be like Maná, that one's trying to be like Kinky. Okay, well, who's trying to be like themselves? To me, that's part of why maybe not just Latin music, but also English music is kind of like in the shithole right now. Yeah. So I don't know. Do you see the same thing, or I mean?
I agree. I think that it's really we live in a really contradictory era, because we open our computers and we have all the information that we possibly can, right? If we wanted to look for musical influences and roots, there they are. I mean, you go to YouTube and you can spend a whole day, tracing the history of rock en español, tracing the history of prog rock, of alternative rock, whatever that was, right? But then I think most people don't know how to look beyond that, So most people are just thinking of, 4 or 5 bands, because those are the 4 or 5 bands they just listened 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago. So we don't have that perspective, historical perspective. And I think that that's kind of like what happened in the 90s. And, like what we were doing, it wasn't mutually exclusive to alternative rock. I mean, like some bands, would listen to this other band. I mean, like people were listening to each other, Yeah,
I don't know, man. To me, it almost feels like also, I guess I compare it to like baseball. With the fall of the great record labels, it's very difficult for artist development to happen. And even if a band is good, because me and Christian went to the show, and I actually thought these musicians were really good. I'm like, wow, these guys are really good, but fuck, man, their show is fucking boring as fuck, dude. This shit's putting me to sleep. But I'm like, they're great musicians. And that kind of goes into like the artist development thing. When the bands kind of went down, it's like each band is their own label. It's extremely difficult for you to be honest with yourself and tell you like, all right, dude, I need to dress better. I need to do this a little bit better. We need to get our business plan together. As opposed to now a band has to do that to themselves. And sometimes it looks also like there is no major league baseball team, I guess, in Rock en Español. Even if they have raw talent, it's like, well, how do you develop it to a major league player? You can't. I mean, like it's almost impossible, you know?
Well, nobody wants to invest, right? That's what it comes down to. Nobody wants to invest any money into it, especially with the how CDs are, record sales and all that kind of stuff.
But whenever there's something like that, man, where the old system has crashed, to me, there's a ridiculously great opportunity for something new to rise to the top. I mean,
I'll give you an example, and I think that's the thing. Most people don't see the opportunity, and that's just I think that's where we need to think outside the box, right? So Babasónicos from Argentina, they were signed, they were kind of the hit band in Argentina. They were signed. They put out some really funky, weird albums before the 90s, but they were great. I mean, I really liked them, but they wouldn't sell. Check this out. This is what happened in Argentina. Like the economy took went to the tank in 2001.
Right.
They were working on a CD. Like their label, said, you know what? See you. Peace out, right?
Bye.
And so they decided to release their CD on their own. And there was no money in Argentina. And when I say no money, like really, people were not, they were bartering at that point,
Holy
so
shit.
they started doing shows. Just so they wouldn't starve, right? And they started actually putting out B-sides, and every show they would have a different performance, and they would create different scenographies, and they were either selling out these shows really cheap, and they were selling them out they were or they would be selling B-sides, as I said, so that's how they managed to not only come through, but then that album Jessico changed their it became a changed their career. It became a bestseller, and they did that all because they didn't have money. They had to come up with.
What's that saying? Something is the mother of invention.
Yeah. Necessity is the mother of invention.
There you go, necessity.
So we need to think about that and seize on that, which is a challenge because you're right. If you don't have money to invest, well, then you develop a business plan, right? But that's something that that's when bands need to be. One is the creative part, and it needs to happen. Bands do need to foster their influences, foster their music, get better at their craft. But then the other thing is the music, the business plan. They need to start thinking, okay, no one's gonna really pay me for to play just because they're gonna pay me because I know how to play. How do I make money? Do I put out CDs, just edition only, where people can buy it on my show? Do I put out merchandise? That it's not just the same old T-shirt, but I also put out, a beanie or
something.
Yeah, you start thinking of ways of actually bringing that
revenue
in, and then you save that money instead of just spending it we got $20, let's go, to in and out. Actually save that money and then try to contact a producer. That's something that we don't do much, right? We self-record, self-produce our bands, and no one's
And what's surprisingly, the production end of a recording is so important because I even had Christian listen to some other stuff that we're recording with our band, and when you're involved and you're recording your own stuff, you think, wow, man, this shit's gold. And then all of a sudden you have somebody else listen to it and they're like, you know what? You need to add this muted guitar here. You need to, that's Hollywood in the back. And you need to add, thirds and fifths on your vocals on here to thicken that up. He was telling me stuff like that. And I'm like, fuck, man, this guy's right. He's right. In order to get to that next level, I mean, I could sound like the next garage band that's out, but in order to really separate myself from the pack, from the rest of the people, you have to go that extra mile. You need to get that producer. You need to get somebody to lead you in the right way, and you can't do everything. So going back to even the previous interview that we had with Sonsoles, you need to get your team together. So
yeah. It's one of the things we always, we have addressed. Take us back, man. Like,
yeah, I'm sorry, I'm all interrupting him, but go ahead, continue with with.
No, actually, go ahead. Take us back to the beginnings when you started doing the shows. Like, what bands did you work with? I mean, I know that. Were you also at one point a road manager? So you've been. I mean, you have been involved in a lot of things, right?
At that time, I'll give you the list of like the bands. But at that time, and basically thinking of the team, I was the team. Like I did a lot, and just because at the time I didn't know how to delegate, and at the same time there were not that many people that wanted to, right? And that's something that, to tell the truth, like I wish more people would think of like this as a not necessarily a profession, but something that like you can do behind the scenes. Not everybody should be the musician. I don't play, right? Anything. And I never been envious of anybody that goes on stage. I actually respect that a lot, right? But I think that my function was very different. Like my function was to make that happen, right? So at the time, really, this was not professionalized, and I think that we still have ways to go to make it professional, to professionalize our industry or our scene. And so, as I said, as a fan, I would see people putting on shows, and I would, once I started thinking about putting shows, those are the people that I reach out to. Hey, so you used to put out shows, and most of these people, they're actually, I should acknowledge them as Club Rock en Español. There were three girls, Flora, Yvonne, and Alma. They actually started doing shows in the early 90s, and they put out like 3 big size festivals in the All County Jail, or All City Jail in LA, in Lincoln Heights. And they brought, they were 3 different, they brought Osomatli. They brought, Osomatli at the time was barely starting, Quinchango.
Yeah.
As
this
well
is one of the things
like
you haven't even heard of them nowadays, but.
As well as all the local bands. So it was like this big festival, right? Like big festival in terms of 15 to 2,000 people. Like big at that time. Like
it's a pretty good number, man.
Pretty good number, right? And so I went and asked them how do you put a show together? How do you advertise it? So I started asking people, and then that's how like I started putting on my shows. And then next thing like, bands are like, hey, can you book us shows? And that's how I became a manager. And then, I was booking shows, and I was like, hey, how about if, like, we got this show in Sacramento, and then we got this show in Chicago, or we got this show, like, in Vegas. And that's how I started going, like, it was just basically learning as I went, right? And then I met people that used to do sound, and it's like, hey, come on, and you'll be our sound engineer,
But at that moment, were the people... Were they asking you for like, well, how much are you going to pay me? Or did you have sponsors? Were you funding this everything on your own? Or
yes.
how? I mean, it just seems like there's a lot of connection between you and I, because I started out also, as a fan. I started out as a fan. I went and I saw this band over at the Westchester.
Yeah.
Which was kind of like the spot, I guess.
Yes, it was.
And I started talking to, Melinda from the A&M. It's like, hey, how do you put a show together? So when you're telling me this, I'm like, oh my God, that's kind of like the thing I did, But I'm sorry, go ahead. Go on.
I think that's something that we all need to do. Like as musicians, as promoters, like we ask, hey, and I think, I was the shyest person. I mean, back then, like honestly, I was really, really shy. Like the spectacle, like like my first shows, I actually had this, like these friends, like telling, asking the bands, hey, you want to play that show? Like I just didn't have the nerve,
the courage.
Okay. And so of course later on, like I started putting out the flyers, going to radio shows, and like one thing about history, well, because I'm a historian now, but one thing to remember is like it's never like on a straight line. Things ebb and flow.
Yes, I have noticed
in the
that.
early 90s, like believe it or not, we could book, like through, like Flora, for Club Rock en Español and other promoters, like there were bookings at the Roxy, at the Trovador, at the Whiskey, and then House of Blues came along. And those are things that we don't have now as much, right?
Now, those 3 young ladies that you mentioned,
yes.
My understanding is those were the 3 girls that started this movement here in LA?
They did. Yes, they definitely did. And especially because they brought in the local scene. There were other promoters around, but then they would only bring, like the big names. And then, like sometimes it wouldn't work because these promoters were thinking of the quick buck. And they're like, oh, Caifán is hot. Let's bring them. And they wouldn't make that much money, and then they would just peace out, right? Whereas them, they stuck around. They were the first ones to bring Café Tacuba, Maldita, and you know, like also have local bands play with them, as opposed to, oh, you know, which happens a lot these days. Like, oh, you know, there's Soy and there's Phobia and there's no local act, right? I mean, I haven't seen that bill as complete yet, right? But then you have a lot of that, right? Whereas, you know, like they were able to integrate both, you know, like the touring bands and then, you know, like the local bands, and that's how the local bands got known.
Yeah.
Yeah, porque definitivamente están promoviendo el producto de Los Ángeles.
Exactamente.
Y esa es una cosa muy, muy buena que definitivamente creo que tiene que pasar un poco más cuando vengan los artistas internacionales, como de lo que hablamos anterior, think outside the box.
Yes.
Si vas a poner, eso es otra oportunidad donde puedes ver a un artista local en otro escenario y tal vez dice, oh, tal vez podemos desarrollar a este nuevo talento.
Pero una cosa también que está más facilito dicho que hecho, porque en veces el talento que está ahorita, aunque haya mucho talento, en veces no está completamente listo para vendérselo al público. Y se me hace que muchos de los promotores a lo mejor no quieren invertir ese tiempo en tratar de traer esos grupos y como estabas diciendo, nada más quieren sacar la feria rápido y ahí nos vemos.
Sí. Pero te haces necesario. You make yourself useful and necessary. Why? How? Empieza a pasar flyers. Hubo una banda aquí que a principios de los 2000 que la verdad es que en cuanto a música todavía no estaban ahí. O sea, era Rascuache. No sé si... Rascuache. Y el chavo Benítez, Adam Benítez, que se llama... él venía de otras bandas, su hermano tocaba en bandas de Epitaph. O sea que, yeah, so he had the business plan, right?
I know who you're talking about now, yeah.
Entonces, I mean, you know, they're friends and they know that their music wasn't up to it, you know? But they would always be passing out flyers. So guess what? All the promoters would be like, oh, so you're passing out flyers, you're making noise? Let me put you in, you know, as the opening spot. And you know what? That's the thing, like, you do need to be, like, necessary for the promoters. So they're like, okay, you could play great, but how many people are you going to bring? And I know that I'm sounding like the promoter
no,
here.
But that's the necessary...
That is the fact, though. You know, that is the reality of it. But, you know, again, this is very interesting, too, because now we have Facebook. You know, prior to Facebook, we had the MySpace. And everybody's just electronically,
actually,
you know, passing out flyers. And that was one of the things that my band at the time, we were, you know, doing well because we were passing out flyers all the time at the Whiskey, at the Troubadour, you know, over at the Viper Room, and it just all along the Sunset Strip, you know. At one time, like the biggest crowd we ever pulled at the time, it was 500 people.
That's pretty good.
That's pretty good for a local band, you know. It took us like, you know, almost 2 years to get to that level, but we're pretty satisfied.
You know what? I'm sorry to interrupt you on this, but we played a show a while ago, and actually even Christian even told me, he's like, you know what are you trying to get out of these shows? Because, you know, there's people they're not showing up. There's 4 bands and people aren't showing up. And I kind of reflected on that, and I'm like, you know what, Christian's right. Like, what needs to happen in order, obviously the marketing that's been going on, the club owner was marketing it. He printed out flyers. He posted them. You know, we all, you know, posted it wherever we were doing
Basically
the promotions.
did what he could.
Yeah, and you can't blame the club owner. I thought the club owner actually did a pretty good job, but still the fans weren't there. It's a little frustrating. It is. You just kind of want to pull your hair out and go like, well, what am I doing wrong, or what do I need to do in order to get these fans here? Because me playing on stage, it's great because I get to play my music and I get to hang out with my friends and stuff. But ultimately, like you said, if you're not necessary because you can't pull anybody, then what's the point?
There's
you
not
know?
a magic formula, but what it is, I think, is develop that connection and develop that connection as people. And that's something that I guess before we had talked 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have said this. But one thing that I have sold my soul to the devil now because I do corporate events with Telemundo. But one thing is that at City Walk, which is, you know, where we do the shows.
Okay, actually, if you can tell us exactly what you do at City Walk, because this is Mr. Big Timer over here. Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you in a sec. So
okay.
One thing that, you know, like it was learned at City Walk, not through our shows, but the other shows that City Walk have been promoting, is that they went really heavy on social networks. And that's great, right? But then, you know, like there was a show where they had 2,000 confirms on an invitation.
Likes or whatever.
Yeah, like people said, yeah, we're gonna
We're
go.
gonna be there.
So they were expecting a huge crowd, and guess what? Less than 200 people showed up.
Wow, dude.
Yes.
Holy
So,
crap.
Only
yeah,
10%.
like basically, it's not only putting the word out there, but develop that connection where you tell people this is gonna be fun. You gotta come in. You gotta be here, right? And I'm not saying that like that's. I'm not saying at all that Facebook, Twitter, it's
Any
irrelevant at all. It's just that's just one part of it. Like I think that I go for saturation. If somebody saw on their wall on Facebook, they got invited, but then they see a flyer and their friends saw the flyer, they're like, wow. This is gonna be a good show. You know about it. I know about it. Like people don't connect the dots, right? But people are like, everybody knows about this show, so it's gonna happen. It's gonna be good, right? And that's like as a very pedestrian strategy that I use. Like hit the Facebook before like emails, like and then be out, passing flyers, and people were like, oh yeah, I seen this show already. And when I heard that, I was like, okay, this is good because it means that. It's that saturation where everybody's like, yeah, that show's going to happen. And you know what? That's the thing. Like, like you guys are musicians, but also concert goers, right? We all want to go to a show where there's other people. That there's going to, there's going to be a lot of people.
There's going to be popping and stuff, yeah.
Like very few times. And there's some few times that you want to go to a show where no one's there, right? But really, no one wants that, right? And so when you start hearing that other people know about the show, you're like, everybody's going to go. And also tapping on more youthful networks, like you gotta go to the colleges and not not in like, hey kids, come and check out my show, but like really be genuine about people. You're like,
so do you think then basically like places like Facebook are a double-edged sword in the fact that people will click on it, but they won't necessarily support it. Like truly, they won't actually show up. So what you're saying then is basically you need to establish a relationship with every fan, so to where it's like a more personal thing. Like, hey, dude, I talked to the guitar player for that band.
Yes.
That's cool.
Yeah,
Let's go check them out.
It's part of it, and
And you know what? We actually brought this up. We talked about this a while ago. Like Kevin Hart, the comedian Kevin Hart, does that. He interacts, and it becomes like an interaction where you got to get to know. Not in a creepy way, to get to know the fan, but just, hey, man, it's like, thank you for coming to the show. Like, hope you can come to the next one. And so you start interacting with them. Because, again, when I did the show, when I promoted my shows, when I was with the band, with the 500 people that I told you, that's what we did. We interacted a lot with people, with like guys, girls, especially girls at the time. That actually had to have benefit, because I was the only Hispanic guy in the band. So hey, so that was kind of like that was a cool thing. But
no, and I think that's more to the point. It's one part of it, and it's a very valuable part because like you're sending an invite and it's not costing you money, right? But then that has to be actually like
constantly
put in like one little click, or people that have gone to the shows, like acknowledge them. I mean, I used to pass out CDRs. Like I would, burn CDRs, and that had good results because people would hear the songs of bands that normally they wouldn't, right? I don't know how that would go right now because I know, like we share it through SoundCloud. I don't know if people would be like, oh, CD, where do I play this now? Like I don't know. But then like give out your music, right? But then in a more targeted way, So, like basically, it's establishing that connection and be able to continue, to develop it, So that's and it's not a magic formula. I mean, like also your music has to say something to people, right? If they don't, then. But
it's not even the blame game either, dude. Because it's not really about that. It's just like, how can we fix it?
Yeah, and I think that's like if nothing else, like one thing I could say is like, and I think we don't think about it because we're always thinking about other things, which But one thing is to think of how we professionalize this and that's something that if, as I said, that's kind of like my main thing now, or, whoever asked me, like try to think of this as a profession. Maybe it's not going to pay right away, but think about, like how, like if it's, like any job, like it has a method, it has, like you have to follow the steps training, right? Like anywhere, like from being a dishwasher to being an architect, you have to follow procedure, right?
Right.
I mean, you don't start, you don't start drying the dish until you wash it, right?
Right.
And like you don't start building the house until you design it. Okay. Yeah. So that's one thing that I think that a lot of bands, you know, like, and even the bands that are already working, thinking of how to professionalize themselves. And doesn't all mean just putting more money into it. Means, you know, means, and I was listening to one guy that you guys had, like the sound guy that, you know, like did his masters in Sevilla, right? I forgot I'm blanking out his name.
From
Yeah.
Sonsoles?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's something, it gives you this, you know, all this foundation, right? Doesn't mean that we all have to go to school for this, but it means, you know, like thinking of, okay, let's try to be professional about this. And I confront that, you know, like with my other job as a, you know, event producer for Telemundo. Like some bands, you know, like the opening bands that we get, sometimes, you know, they're kind of, you know, kind of too fresh, right? And you have to tell them, oh, this is why we do sound check, and this is why we do sound check at this hour, right? From the very big, and then, you know, us on the other side, you know, like as promoters or as producers, whatever, we also need to be more open to give out advice and to tell people, like, you know, for very quick thing, you know, when you have a sound check and it's like, why is it that the headlining band has to do sound check first? I always get that, right? And you have to explain why, right? Like, okay, it's the last band, so we, you know, that's the band that, you know, we want the most settings, you know, checked. Whereas the first band, you know, like sound checks last because the first band that goes in, so everything's gonna stay, you know, in on stage. And when showtime comes in, nothing has to be changed, right?
Yeah.
Right.
And so, yeah, that's the little spiel, and it sounds really easy. But then, if you see a sketch and you don't know, you're like, why is it I have to be that 3 when I play at 11, you know, or things like that, right? And so you have to, and this also happens with bigger musicians that really don't know, like their staffs don't know about this. So
Since you're actually doing promotions, and that's your profession, or I'm sorry, not promotions, you're a stage manager, right? From your perspective, what do you think is lacking in rock en español?
well, there's some, you know, I think,
Okay, a few, I guess,
yeah,
because there's a
few,
lot.
Yeah, I think that one thing that I have always tried to run away from, you know, is like, I always say, oh, you know, el pasado fue mejor, you know, like, you know, our best times, you know, they were, you know, like the 90s were the shit, and now it's like, yeah, because, you know, thinking about that, and just kind of like going back to Christian's question of how it was back then. So the early 90s, from, you know, like 92 to 97, I want to say, they were really good years. And that's when we opened, you know, we started going into this, you know, the LA venues, like the Hollywood venues, and
The golden years of rock en español.
in weird ways, like, because it was the first time we were there, you know?
Yeah.
And now we don't think about it, or maybe we do, I don't know, because I don't go to that many shows anymore, but it's like, whoa, there was a Latino band playing at the Whiskey, headlining the Whiskey, having, you know, selling out at the Whiskey, and it was local bands like Los Olvidados, like María Fatal, 15 Letras. I was like, it was a big deal, right? Like, you know, and so that was that, and then from 97 to 2000, 99 to 2000, that it kind of ebbed, you know, like it was just it wasn't the best time, right? And that's when, you know, like the genre started separating a bit, you know. So you had the Skankers, you had, you know, like the Indies, and like the Pastillas and Viva Malpaches, and they wouldn't really play in the same
Line up, the same bill.
And then the 2000s were, you know, like, that's where, when I came in, I did a lot of shows in ska. So that was my thing, ska. But then every 2-3 months, I would have, you know, like this shows that were, you know, of different genres. So you would have 15 Letras playing with Los Abandoned, and then opening up U-Star, which was like more of an indie band, you know? And so, but I would make it known to everybody, like on the flyer, on the promotion, like, look, they're going to be bands from different genres, right? But this is going to be cool because it's like a celebration of the scene. More or less, that's what I would say, right? And people would come in with an open mind. Yeah, perhaps they didn't like Viernes 13. And they were just kind of like, okay, yeah, like...
That's when you go and you get your beer.
Yeah, that's when you go get your beer, right? But then, you know, like, people would stick around, right? So that's, you know, that lasted from 2000 to 2004, 2005. And then after that, we had seen, you know, kind of like this, you know, like fragmentation. And that's one of the things that I think that at this point we lack, you know, I think that, you know, it's the promoters, but also the musicians. I mean, you know, like, it doesn't mean you're going to be best friends of everybody and, you know, go hang out, drink, or have dinner with all these musicians. But, like, you know, be able to be like, oh, you play ska. What's up? I mean, well, we should do a show together. Or this community, like, understand that as a community, right? And be able to say, so you sold 5 shirts. How did you do that? You know, or your record sounds good. Or, you know what, I could help you out. Like, you know, be able to create those, and it's kind of the same thing as in the work market. Like I'm not as in work market, workplace.
Just networking.
And be like, hey, I could help you this. And so that's what's lacking, I think. And then the other thing is, be more assertive on the business plan and be more assertive on putting out your music instead of like, hey, it's on SoundCloud, download it. That's great. No one's going to do it, right? I mean, you have to invite people and make them listen to your music.
Right.
And you know what? One of the biggest things that I had one of my cousins, because we sit down and we kind of discuss about, stuff like, I guess, business stuff, just of the Spanish rock community. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that he told me, he's like, well, pay attention to, if this is a business, is there is demand for rock en español. So go ahead.
I actually want to jump into this also because I believe, especially within the last couple of years, I noticed that there's a big demand for rock en español. One of the things that I have noticed also...
hold on. Before you go into that,
okay.
Explain to me why you think there's a big need for rock en español and I guess not the maná thing. Like besides
no,
the
not
maná
necessarily,
thing, like
not necessarily. But
what
I
else?
mean, I don't know if you actually went through this, if you witnessed this in the past, but at least I did. When I was doing shows, I would basically go out and promote, hand out my flyers, and so on. And one of the things that I did was I went outside of the scene and I started promoting somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And people were looking at it and they're like, oh, qué chido, yo no sabía que había algo de esto. ¿A dónde? ¿Por qué no lo pasa el radio? ¿Por qué no? ¿A dónde lo puedo escuchar? Y empecé a agarrar diferentes reacciones de la gente que les gusta. Que sí, también les gusta el corrido, les gusta banda, todo ese género, pero creo que dentro de ellos todavía creo que tienen un amor por el rock en español.
Pero una de las cosas con eso es de que a lo mejor sí todavía le gusta el rock en español, pero se regresa a la situación de que les gusta suficiente para ir a una tocada o les gusta suficiente nada más para escuchar en el radio o una situación así. Entonces, y no estoy diciendo que no haya la necesidad del rock en español, si no estuviera yo tocando también, pero es una pregunta que de veras te tienes que hacer. A lo mejor la demanda para ese género no está exactamente en Los Ángeles, a lo mejor está en Fresno, a lo mejor está en San José. Es diferentes cosas que necesitamos que pensar y
pues no es masivo y eso hay que saberlo, no vamos a traer 15,000, 20,000 gentes cada...
Claro.
And if that happens, it's gonna be the reventón of the world, right? Pero lo que hiciste me recuerda a lo que yo hacía. Cada vez que hacía un show, iba a tiendas y dejaba flyers, iba a lugares que no eran restaurantes y dejaba flyers, les dejaba pósters. Y lo que hacía era... Me acuerdo porque me gustaba mucho hacerlo, de hecho, que agarraba mi carro un sábado en la mañana y me iba por el este de Los Ángeles, y luego me iba a Southgate, me iba a Linwood, luego agarraba otra vez el freeway, Paramount, y luego acababa en Pomona poniendo flyers, ¿no? O sea, todo el centro, desde el centro, y también al centro de Los Ángeles, que en ese tiempo había más tiendas de rock, o de cumbia también. Y dejaba flyers en donde no necesariamente, y era lo mismo, tratar de llegar a otra gente que normalmente, porque si vas a las tocadas va a ser la misma gente de siempre, ¿no?
Claro.
Entonces, eso es lo que... una que me gustaba porque me dio a conocer mucho más la ciudad. Y también empecé a conocer... Oye, te decía el de la tienda, ¿sabes qué? Vele a dejar flyers a esta persona.
It's pretty cool, dude, actually.
Yeah, eso también me pasó a mí.
Y obviamente también era muy, vamos a decirlo, poético, porque iba manejando por la Firestone y veías una iglesia y la gente estaba saliendo de una quinceañera y cosas así. O sea, empezabas a ver otros... Pero eso ya es algo que me gustaba más, ¿no? O sea, ver la vida de nuestras comunidades, ¿no? Los sábados, domingos. Pero eso lo hacía cada vez que hacía un show. Y me gustaba, no era cansado. Creo que puede ser cansado, pero puedes tener gente que te ayuda, ¿no?
¿Sabes qué? Se me hace que esa es una de las partes donde muchos de nosotros fallamos, de que no estamos poniendo ese esfuerzo para de veras promover las tocadas. Porque tienes razón, muy pocos de nosotros vamos y damos flyers y vamos a las tiendas y podemos poner nuestro póster aquí en las tiendas chiquitas y diferentes cosas así. Pero una cosa también que estaba notando es de que si estás promoviendo un show, se me hace que... uno de mis amigos me dijo, hey, te voy a dar flyers para que los promueves tú este show. Pero yo vivo en Orange County y el show está en Los Ángeles. Entonces es como promover un show en Arizona cuando está tomando parte en California,
sí,
¿no?
Y sabes que no fue así. De hecho, lo que pasaba al principio,
Ajá.
bueno, al principio, las primeras, vamos a decir, década y media de esto, era que había shows en el condado de Orange, había shows en Los Ángeles, había shows en Ventura. Y la gente iba, o sea, yo iba. Y yo, de hecho, venir acá ahorita me recordaba esas veces que venía, no solo, obviamente, a JC Fandango, pero también había otros shows en el Bar Revolución. Había otros shows que hacían otro, o sea, que ahorita no me acuerdo dónde más. Pero veníamos y no en ese momento no sentíamos que era, porque teníamos una que yo creo que éramos más jóvenes y la gasolina estaba más barata, pero íbamos a todos lados. O sea, yo me acuerdo yo tener 18, 19 años y ir a Oxnard, a un show.
Oh, shit.
Ajá, o ahora te digo, vivo en Glendale, pero yo iba a Southgate porque los de Mañana Fatal tenían Las Pampas. Ellos hacían Las Pampas, que era cada viernes y sábado, en Southgate. Y sí, ahorita yo no voy a ir a Southgate a menos que tenga que ir, pero en ese tiempo iba cada fin de semana, cada viernes, cada sábado estaba ahí. Entonces, obviamente que ¿qué hacías del show? También eso, el show tiene que ser una experiencia, ¿no?
Yeah.
Tiene que ser algo que tú digas, voy a ir, van a estar mis amigos, of course there's gonna be girls.
And you know what? That's a little bit of a problem. Actually, we've talked. Me and Christian have talked about that. A lot of these shows that we go to, sorry for the expression, but they're sausage parties, bro. I mean, they really are, dude. And it's like, fuck, man. I don't know what we need to do, but we need to get girls here, because if you get girls here, then you get people to show up, and it's not just the dudes, you know. Which I mean, thanks to all the guys that come out still, you know. But it's a little bit sad to see that. And it's like I was telling Christian, it's just frustrating because you're like, sometimes you just throw up your hands and you go, I don't know what else to do, man. Like, you could give me $1 million and I don't know if I could still bring people in here. You know, like, what is it that you need to do in order to really bring the crowds in here?
The babes.
Y se me hace que está interesante porque sí tiene razón. Más antes, mucha gente sí se lanzaba hasta Oxnard a ir a mirar una tocada y ahorita no quieren salir. You know, and I don't know. Do you think maybe the economy that everyone's kind of bummed out? They're like, fuck it, I'm just gonna stay at home right now.
I think so, but at the same time, you know, like the 90s, I mean, the 90s were a little better on that end, but people still, you know, like most of us were young, and most of us were perhaps, you know, some of us were undocumented, or you know, we're in our first gig, first jobs, and we were always short on money, you know, like I remember times where I was like, I wish I could sell that tire so I could go to this show, you know, like honestly, I have my spare tire or something, you know, but we still made it happen. So, I mean, it's kind of like it's a weird position of me, you know, trying to tell, you know, somebody how to do something, you know, because I think that things have changed, right? And I acknowledge that things that might have worked in the 90s or in the early 2000s might not work now. But then I think that at the end of it is like, we do want to experience as consumers, as concert goers, as musicians. We want to experience. So I think that the best shows that I have seen, you know, like, is where you incorporate these different things, right? You have a live band, but then perhaps you have a DJ. But then you have a DJ that is playing something new. And perhaps it's a nice place where people want to go and hang out, right? And also, yeah, like on the tricks of the trade, I mean, like, you get on the phone and you're like, okay, how much money do I need to pay the rent? Okay, that. How many people can I get in for free without making it always them being for free? Whereas like, hey, help me out. Just come in for free and bring a couple people. Or you come in and I'll pitch a beer, you know? Like when you get here or something like that, you know? Like, so...
Or bring a flyer and you get flyer. 2 for 1.
Exactly, something like that, you know? Like, and we're perhaps thinking of the show not as just kind of like this music intensive event where, oh yeah, there's gonna be music, but you know, you're gonna have fun because there's gonna be this and that, or the place has a pool, or yeah, like it has billar.
You gotta make it an experience, not necessarily just, hey, bands are gonna be playing, because there's bands playing everywhere.
Exactly, and then, you know, perhaps you make it cool where, look, this DJ is gonna be spinning music that you don't hear anywhere else, right? Or we're gonna have giveaways that are not just gimmickies, like people really want to have these giveaways, you know. I mean, those are, yeah.
It's true. You know, let's talk about something else. I think you were also a writer for a couple magazines. Wasn't there a magazine from Spain that you were dealing with the punk scene?
Yes. So in the many things I have done, one, that's how I got started. I wanted to be a writer. There's plenty of movies about rock writers, especially in the U.S., right? And that's why I never imagined myself to be, the promoter putting shows together or the manager. I mean, like those were, like as I said, I was a geek and I'm still pretty much a nerd. So,
Hey man, nerds are taking over the world right now, dude.
we are, yeah.
That's for sure.
Too bad I'm not in computing, but that's where I thought my contribution was going to be writing. Writing about the scene, writing that great Rock en Español book that still hasn't been written, So at the time, in the 90s, there was La Banda Elástica, and then Retila, which was shorter, and then they had a war, which we could talk about that later. But Banda Elástica and Retila, they got in a war, because my publication is cooler than you, and they both started putting on shows. And one was Las Noches del Dragón, the other one was Retila Nights, I want to say. I forgot the name of it. So you had a lot of this competition. You know what?
Competition's good, man.
Yes.
Yeah, that was good.
It could be destructive, but, it could also be good because you're always like, okay, what's that other person doing? Or what's, and so that was that. And then Al Borde came along later. I was actually the second editor for Al Borde for a number, for about a year. And I kept writing for them as a contributor afterwards, So, and then through Al Borde, there's this magazine, and, quite respected magazine in Spain called Zona de Obras. And they have covered, all the, the Latin American countries. And they have done stuff about, the U.S. At one point, they were really interested about, what was going on here in the U.S. They actually did a couple shows here in the U.S. in 2000. Like they brought Bumburi and Juan Perro at the House of Blues. So through that connection, I started writing for them, and then I was they asked me if I could write about the punk bands, the Latino punk bands in the U.S. Which that's one thing to to touch on. All our music genres, they're really fragmented at this point, and it's not like we all prefer one style of music over the other. I mean, that's just that. But one thing is to think that they're not mutually exclusive.
Like that one fan doesn't like the other genre as well.
Yeah, I think that and musicians, we're not we know some or a lot don't only listen to one genre of music, right? So that's the thing with punk. I mean, punk has also been part of our rock en español scene in different ways, So I basically researched for all these bands. Some of them from LA that we have heard about. Some of them that we have never heard about. Some of them that are huge, not only in our scene, but like the hardcore, like the more like hardcore punk scene, like Los Crudos from Chicago. They're huge. I mean, they're huge worldwide, in that, very socially conscious type of punk. And so, it's amazing that how, basically every state where there's a sizable Latino population has a big, Latino punk scene that, also mingles with the other punks, Not the OC punks, but more on the, hardcore, type of scene. I mean, the OC also has, their own history because a lot of members, are actually Latino, second, third generation, and you saw them at,
The Vandals.
Yeah, the Vandals, right? With
Joe Escalante.
Joe Escalante, who I got to, do a little email chat, and he put out his own record label. And so there were, hundreds of entries. And so the book got published. I can show it to you in a bit. I brought it. And so it was, it was edited in Spain. And so I was able to put in some of the bands, from our scene that also, do punk. So that was a really interesting experience. And also with them, I used to cover, the national, quote unquote, rock en español or Latin alternative scene. So
wow, that's very.
So it's interesting,
man.
how sometimes we think we don't get any coverage, but other people around the world, are paying attention. Like, hey, what's going on over there? And they know these bands and more than sometimes we know ourselves. If you're into booking and even bands, you have to go to either, if it's a new place, you have to promote the hell out of it. And if it's not a new place, you have to build that place where people are like, oh, that's where the shows happen, right? Because that's the thing. Like, you know, we're talking about Triton Fest or any other venue, like the Westchester. Sometimes people would, you know, like I would drive. I didn't even know who was playing, but I knew there would be people there, so I could pass out my flyers, right? So you have to create that space, and then, you know, like you have to talk to the owner or whoever, you know, be like, hey, look, give me a Sunday or give me a Thursday, because they're not gonna sometimes, or if it's really not happening, get a Friday or a Saturday, you know, but then make it a party where people are just gonna be like, look, we're gonna go there.
Well, it seems like we're running out over here, so we're gonna have to close out the podcast at this point. But before we do that, if you could tell us what you're doing right now, what endeavors are you in, and you know, just go ahead and tell us a little bit about what's happening right now with you.
Okay. Well, the book, the Punk Latino book, it's called Diccionario de Punk Latino, got published at the beginning of the year. You can buy it on Amazon. I mean, it has basically entries of every single Latin American country, and, you know, like their bands, their punk bands. So that's pretty cool. It's a little pricey. I think it's $30 or $40. I don't know.
No, that's not bad.
Yeah,
man. I mean,
and it's available through Amazon. And, you know, I'm part of, you know.
¿El libro es en español o en inglés?
En español.
En español.
So I'm a group. Sí, soy un grupo. Es un grupo grande de colaboradores. It's really cool. On my personal, professional, like, I do stage manage for Telemundo on the summers for Descarga, their concert series. I'm also, you know, working on this is my second year of my PhD in history, and so I'm also very interested. You know, like all this music. I mean, really interests me in how we young Latinos use the public space, or how we create space, you know. So there's a video I did, and that's on YouTube, the ephemeral forums of Southeast LA, and so how we, you know, like back then and even now, you know, like we had a restaurant, or we have a pizzeria, or we had a, you know, car auto shop, and how we created that space into, you know, like a youth space where, you know, we had bands and we had shows there, right?
Kind of like a social experiment.
Well, more like how we use and transform public space, right?
Okay.
Because there's really not a lot of public space in here, especially in California.
It's
in
all
LA.
congested here.
Yes, and then, you know, like, where do we go if we want to hang out with people? Like the mall, right? So, you know, like in our communities, how we have how we have appropriated public space, even malls. And so I just, you know, like an essay of mine just got published in an academic compilation called Post-Ghetto, Reimagining South LA, and I looked at Plaza Mexico in Linwood, and I look how we are Latinos, you know, have, you know, like in that space, how we use it, you know, and also how we use other spaces, you know, like, and so, I mean, I'm pretty big on that public space and how, or just the space, how, and it has to do with the shows, right? It has to do with what I saw, you know, like, coming of age, you know, like in Southgate, in Linwood, in the San Fernando Valley.
So when you were driving around passing flyers, you were collecting data.
Yeah.
So you can put this on what you're doing now then, right?
Yeah. So, and at the time I didn't know, you know, so, but
cool.
it does have to do with the music, because this is not a music that it's being fed to us on the radio or on TV, right? It's something that, you know, like everybody that, you know, a lot of people that we listen to rock en español or rock latinoamericano, we do it because we like it, and we are always seeking it, right? And it's yeah, like once we're here in the U.S., like we're like, where are we gonna listen to this with other people? That's not gonna be my bedroom, right? Or where are we gonna you know, have our friends' bands play when, you know, none of these venues wanna have us because, you know, like we don't bring enough people, or we're too dark for them, you know?
Yeah.
And then we make our venues, right?
You know, about the space situation. The whole reason, at least for me with the podcast, was to be able to bring people names of different stuff that's happening, because nobody else was doing it. And me and Christian are like, you know what? Let's just do it because nobody else is doing it. I mean,
yes, and that's creating that space, right? So congratulations for that, and thank you for having this.
Well, I'll tell you this.
It's an honor to have you, man.
I felt really, really happy, man, when I had one of my neighbors, and this guy, he listens to our CDs, he likes our music, and but I didn't know he was downloading the stuff from iTunes. And then I talked to him one day, and he's like, dude, you know what I really love is when you guys talk about all these bands and your guests are talking about these bands, I go online and I look them up. And he's like, now I know who Maria Fatal is. Now I know who, you know, Chenche Berrinche is and stuff like that. And it's like, holy shit, like, you don't even realize that just by you throwing out those names, there's people out there that are like, oh shit, I haven't heard them. Let me go look them up.
Yeah.
So I mean, it creates awareness, and I guess everyone can cut out their little niche, no matter how small or how big you are.
Mhm.
And me and Christian are just two dudes who we just decided, shit, man, nobody else is doing this. Let's go do it. I mean,
kudos for you because it's really needed, and like that's the thing. Like you're right, and I grew up, in this, like in another era because the internet wasn't as around,
yeah.
and so I would read, fanzines, and so there was La Neta fanzine also here in Mexico. People would actually mail me those, like, and I would like also I would be reading all these bands. I would try to look their CDs. Now it's much easier, right? Because like I'm gonna list 5 bands right now: Los Olvidados, Cábula, Voz de Mano, Ruido de Fondo, Las 15 Letras, and then like I can go and Google them, right? I might find some stuff, I might not, right?
You could buy it like that, man.
Yes.
You can just go on iTunes and purchase it right there and then.
Whereas before, I would write these names and then I would go like crazy, try to find these things, or like, and then I would ask my cousins in Mexico, hey, have you seen this? And most of them are not rockeros,
Yeah.
so they would have to be like, oh, do I really gotta go to that store? But they did. Or when I would go back, I'm from Guadalajara. I would go to Guadalajara. I would go to like this little stores and I would be like, hey, you have this records, and people would like look at me like, where do you get that, right? And like we have this luxury, but I mean the good thing is that you guys are putting it in context, in larger context, instead of be like, Cábula, yeah, who's that, right? Whereas in here maybe you will talk, you talk a little bit about Cábula, or you talk a little bit about the Westchester and what he meant, instead of like you type in the Westchester, oh, that's a bar that's closed, but no, he meant this for people, yeah,
Right.
As a
And we're going to
space
talk
that,
about it
mhm.
in the future podcast.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to talk about it because that has it's a jewel. It was like one of those little hidden jewels here in LA that was very supportive
Mhm.
with the whole rock en español, and there are some other places out there nowadays,
but
like
don't-
Roberto's is
Don't be
doing
so
it,
sad
and-
though, bro, because there still are those bars and those clubs that are supporting the
No,
rock en
that's what I'm
español.
saying.
Yeah.
You know, you still have like
There was Bar Revolucion here in Santa Ana that Jesus Pelos did, and in the 90s there was Iguana, which was Las Pampas in Southgate. In San Fernando Valley, as I said, like Al Borde had this at Salon Corona. That used to be FM station. It was like a hair rock band.
in the valley
In the valley, yeah.
of Lancashire.
Yes.
right.
So it
Oh,
became
man.
Salon Corona, and then on Thursdays, Al Borde would have shows, right? Yes, and Jack Sugar Shack in Hollywood,
Yeah.
So there are all these places. I mean, like people are really fond of the Westchester, but like I was really fond of like of Las Pampas, and that was kind of like where I came of age because I was like 18, 19,
Wow.
Cool,
Well,
man, very cool.
man, this is a lot of cool stuff for listeners to look up, Google it, check it out, man. And
Yeah,
wow,
definitely.
we're really happy that you showed up and you're able just to talk, man. Just to talk to us and give us that information of what you see in the scene, and how we can better this situation and move forward in a positive way. And wow, and definitely we want to tell everyone who's listening, please support by purchasing our guest stuff. If we have a guest, look up their stuff, man. Check it out, read it. I mean, purchase it, because we're all a community. We're trying to support each other. So thank you once again. And
thank you guys.
No, thank you. It was a pleasure. And then you know what? I would love to have you again. There's like so much stuff, man. There's so much stuff. You know what? I actually kind of got a little
Sidetracked.
starstruck. Starstruck,
Come
I
on.
guess, dude. Because no, I mean the way I see you is like you're very knowledgeable, man. You have a lot. You're basically like a walking encyclopedia. You and there's several of other cats out there. Like you just mentioned Pelos. He's another smart dude, man.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, sometimes that dude is like way too smart, man. But anyways, man. But
Alright.
thank you so much for coming down, and love to
we'll
have
do
you
it
again.
Okay, sounds
Yeah.
good. Thanks so much.
all right. Well,
Cool.
thanks to everybody out there, and you all have a good night.